always mute my. I always used to
Right.
when I mute my phone.
Right. And usually, see, I can see, I don't know if you can see up there at the top where it says host, I have a microphone that shows it blinking, going up there. So that's when I know where the sound's
Right.
coming
When I mute my phone.
from. So that's, and usually, see, I can see, I don't know if you can see up there at the top where it says host, I have a microphone that shows it blinking, going up there. So that's when I know where the sound's coming from. So that's, and usually, see, I can see, I don't know if you can see up there at the top where it says host.
Most likely it'll hear your background.
I have a microphone that shows it blinking, going up there. So that's when I know where the I have not, but I can text him.
Mentioned to Freddie and Robbie, I understand the governor wants to cut another $1 billion from the state budget. And I think, just my personal opinion, I think we're going to feel some of it. And I don't know how you guys feel, but I think we're looking at maybe 2 to 3 years before the economy gets back to where we were, say, January 2020.
Yeah, I was just thinking on the way driving here this morning, Commissioner Carrier, that I think right now with all the extra unemployment benefits and stuff that are flowing, it's like we're not maybe feeling it quite as badly as
It's being muted
as we will. Yeah.
Nice. Freddie, that was borderline.
Yeah, it's such a dichotomy because, I have a portfolio of clients and I see clients, just very much struggling. And I visited with a client yesterday who said April was a record month for him and May beat it.
And what business is he in?
Just very much some mutual friends. I visited with a client yesterday.
Oh, okay, Jimmy. Yeah. But when you just think about we're a sales tax state and gas tax is bound to be down. Sales tax is going to be down. I'm just not sure how the state's not going to pass on some of their misery to us and to all the counties.
No, I agree.
All right, gentlemen, we are online and streaming now.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner. I'm off camera.
She paid extra for that.
I'll wait just another minute or two and see if Commissioner Wheeler shows up because he said that he was coming in person. And we have Commissioner McAllister on the phone at the beach. God bless him.
Life is rough.
And,
No, I'm on the phone. I'm not at the beach. I'm on the phone. That's it.
Doing his service while on vacation.
yeah. Props to him. And then here in the room we've got myself and Commissioner Malone and Susan Saylor, our communications director, and Allison Wilkinson, our county attorney. And at the moment, we don't have any public here, but the building is open to the public, so they could come if they want. Did you try to get a hold of Mr.
Mm-hmm. I haven't gotten a response from him, so if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I would say what with my son. Well, on my way here this morning, I saw a cow out on the side of the road. Random, but unless something like that.
Was it a black Angus?
It was.
Where about one?
Antioch Road. So I called and recorded it. There's a little bit of a blind deal right where it was, too. And I thought that's in the road. Anyway, hopefully he's not having any kind of trouble this morning. Did you?
briefly.
Tis the season.
Maybe equipment.
In fact, it was right before, right at the new school.
Well, I guess let's go ahead and start, and hopefully Commissioner Wheeler will join us here in a minute or two. I will open us in prayer if you would lead us in our pledge, Commissioner. Dear Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you so much for the blessings that you give us. Thank you for everything you provide for us. I pray that you would just be with our meeting this morning. Pray that you would just be with our discussion. I pray that you would lead us in the way that you have us to go for the people of this county. Just pray that you would bless our county, bless our country. This is a really tough time right now for a lot of people. Pray that you would just be with us. God, just thank you for Jesus. In his name I pray. Amen.
If you'll join me in honoring the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Commissioner McAllister, I already told him this, but Commissioner Carriger, this goes for you too. If either one of you have trouble hearing us at any point, please speak up and say so. First thing we need to do is determine that this meeting is an essential function. And is that something we need to do? Okay. Determine this meeting is an essential function and approve our agenda. So do I have an motion to that?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion by Commissioner Carriger, second by Commissioner Malone. Any discussion of that? All right, I'll take roll call, I guess, since we have some people on the phone and I can't see Gary. So, Gary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Carriger?
I'll vote yes.
Malone?
Yes.
Tester is a yes, and Wheeler is absent. Motion passes. 4 yes, 0 no, 1 absent. All right, next item on our agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was March 5th. And those were included in the packet for the meeting. So I have
Motion like a long time ago.
that was a long. This seemed like a long time ago.
I will make the motion that we approve the minutes from March 5th.
All right.
I'll
motion
second.
Motion by Commissioner Malone, second by Commissioner Carriger. Any discussion of that? All right, let's take a roll call. Commissioner McAllister?
Yes.
Commissioner Carriger?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Mr. Tester is a yes. And again, 1 absent. So 4 yes, 0 no, 1 absent. All right, our first item for discussion is Rule 12A. And Allison emailed us the latest information on that. Do you want to give any kind of introduction to this? Or?
No, I hope that the memo would get you in good position with a couple of weeks to study it. So I think you're ready to roll.
Yes, thank you very much for doing that, for getting it to us when you did. There's one or two little things that I noticed that I wanted to discuss or throw out there for discussion. Of course, we need to talk about the example that we have. And one thing I was wondering is if we have 15 commissioners and everybody votes for 5, that's 75 votes. So, I mean, these numbers that we just threw up on the board are not very realistic at all in terms of an actual vote. So, but it does simplify it down to understand easier, maybe. So that was something I was wondering is if we wanted to make it more realistic in terms of the vote totals.
How so? Of course, I guess the most votes any one individual, any one commissioner could give would be 15, right? So
right, you'd probably have to add more nominees. and you'd probably have to bump those top people up to 14 or 15. Another thought I had was a critical point we discussed in this is that you don't have to have 8 votes to be chosen. And so it might make sense to tweak the example to have a person being chosen with less than 8 votes, with 7 votes or something. Because I can see how that could still be confusing. Because I know that was a really big point. I think that got everybody off track when we did this. Was everybody was thinking you had to have 8 votes, and the way we have it worded, you don't. We just say that people with the most votes shall be elected. And the third question I had was, do we want to take nominees again on the second or third round of voting, which is the way this example is written. And the way the rule currently reads with this latest draft, it says the process will begin again. So, which is why I think Allison did what she did in the example. But we could pretty easily, I think, tweak that to say the voting process shall begin again if we don't want to go through nominations again on each round. So, those are a few things I thought about. Any of you guys have comments or questions?
When it comes to the examples, I don't know that you could give examples of everything that happens. I think we just put down an example and, do the best we can to explain it. I don't know that you could cover everything that might happen.
Yeah, it's a good point, Commissioner Carey. It's tough to try to encapsulate all this and head off all confusion and questions ahead of time. And I know that's what we're trying to do. And it's almost impossible to envision everything that might happen.
I would agree with Phil on that. You just have to, it'd be tough to give every example, but I'm kind of like you. The more I have to refresh my memory again, why we didn't say you had to have at least 8 votes, your second question. And I know we've discussed this many times, but again, it's been since March. And I can't remember our rationale why you didn't have to say you had 8.
Why you don't have to have 8. Allison's, I see the wheels turning down there.
Well, if I can refresh your recollection, it is that the wording here is the nominees receiving the most votes. And if you look further back in the appendix, I believe I included the original rule to show the changes. Did I do that, or is that in this one? And so that you can compare it. So it's the most votes. Normally, you need to have the majority of the membership. And so and that was what gave some trouble, I guess, in 2018, was applying this rule, thinking that it had to be the majority of the membership when it's just the most votes. And you don't have an express recitation that Commissioner Tester is referencing, that it does not require the majority of the membership. So,
and I think Commissioner Tester is suggesting that we could example that, maybe not specifically state it has to be, or it doesn't have to be a majority of the commission. Rather than specifically stating that, you're just saying the example could reflect that it didn't have to.
Yeah. For instance, in the example that we have, for instance, in the first round, nominee D, as in daylight, instead of 9, it could be 7, for instance. And you would still select the top 4, but nominee D would not have 8 or more votes.
except in that one, you'd have 3 to 5.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. You would also, I've got that written down here too. I didn't say. You'd also have to drop E and F down to 6 or something.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay.
Commissioner Wheeler will not be joining.
Okay. Thank you for letting us know.
Yeah.
It's okay. What do you all think about Gary? Did she answer your question well enough, or?
Yeah, I'm just sitting here thinking. Again, everything we do, we have to have majority. And I know we've discussed this over and over and over and over and over, and we've beaten this to death. But that still gets me every move, everything we ever vote on. There always has to be if we don't have a majority of the votes, it doesn't pass. Like I said, it doesn't have 8 votes or something like that. So that's just still sticking in my mind.
Gary, I'm afraid if we left it at 8 votes, we might be there all night and still not come to a conclusion.
Well, I agree.
If I may, Commissioner Tester and Commissioner McAllister, to your question, the authority for what you're referencing is that the role and jurisdiction of a committee, other than is required by law, is to investigate and study matters, provide information, and present recommendations to the board concerning those topics and business as delegated to the committee by those rules or by the board. So as to the committees, any request or recommendation to the full commission must be adopted by a majority. So that is the place that is super specific as to a committee. If you choose though, just like here, what you originally had was the 5 nominees receiving the most votes. An express recitation in a rule, so long as you're addressing the fact that it could be a potential conflict, but you've considered it, and you're saying that for purposes of electing 5 members to serve on this committee, you may develop a rule that reflects that one does not have to have the majority of the full commission membership in order to be elected to that. I mean, that is the discretion that you have with respect to doing this. I mean, so just so long as you understand, the rules will work together. And you are absolutely correct that for taking action, there does have to be majority of the membership. But I think what you as a committee wanted to work on here was how to identify the membership of this specific committee without requiring that 8, because you couldn't get 8 in action of the 15, and it was leaving the commission with the inability to give this membership give this committee the ability to function. So I mean, that's what I think as the wording committee, your struggle is going to be, is if you want to manifest a committee of 5, how will you do so? And if you require that majority, you may not get it. And you've seen in 2018 that was the case ultimately, was you couldn't get it. So you're developing this process, and so long as I think in the original wording, it didn't require 8. I think that was an exception to your general rules. And I think that the interpretation on the fly may have been just like you're thinking, remembering that, well, isn't that so, when the rule was written expressly differently. And I think you as a committee want to focus on the express words that you want yourselves and your colleagues to follow. So you have the authority, is what I'm trying to say, to develop a rule that will be separate and distinct from the general rule.
And I guess I would add to that, Gary, that I guess this is an internal rule that's our own, and I think it's kind of what Allison's saying. So we can do it that way if we want. But the other thing I think is, depending on how many people don't vote for 5, because we're not requiring that, and depending on how many nominees you have, that's when we may get in trouble, or have issues of not having people getting 8 votes.
Yeah, I am fine with the way it's written, but I just think we'll be ready to answer that question as to why we did it. Because I'm feeling that may be brought up if it gets that way. Just as long as you have the information available on why.
Yeah. Okay, Commissioner Malone.
Well, I do think there is value in either the verbiage actually saying that we're not requiring 8, or the example reflect that we're not requiring 8. Because what you're saying is now we're not stating that either place, and we leave it open for confusion the night of a meeting, a full commission meeting. So I think there is value to either specifically stating 8's not required or reflecting it in the example. So I agree with that. And in terms of adding voting in front of process, I think that's fine. So I'm certainly okay with those changes.
Commissioner Carragher McAllister, how do you feel about the idea of taking nominees again on second and third rounds of voting?
Well, I tell you what, I've thought about that, and you know, I kind of opt to not. I kind of think let's keep this thing as efficient as we can, and that's just my feeling. Work with what you got.
So as it's written now, you could accept an additional nominee on the second round of voting, but not after. Is that?
It doesn't specifically say. It just says the process will begin again.
Right.
And that does reflect that it would start from the ground up, that if your first effort to elect committee-on-committee membership did not result in a 5-member panel, that you would build it from the ground up. And because with the
potential new nominee.
That's correct. And maybe the person or persons who did not receive the number of votes, I think the alternative to running forward with just those 2 would be that if 2 people did not get the number of votes, running it a second time, you may be in the position that they never get the number of votes and you're back to where you started.
Or if they consistently tie.
Yeah.
Or just if they didn't have the support of the number of people, maybe people would stand down off the vote and you couldn't fill the 5th slot. I mean, that's a hypothetical, of course. But the process to begin again would mean that you would have greater opportunity to then get the most votes. Let's just say you have 2 people and then you're running off between those. Maybe then but what if nobody voted? I mean, that's an extreme example, but that could happen. And that almost did kind of happen in your land block on the last one. The maintenance of the vote. So those are your 2, I think, issues when I looked at it. Those are the 2 points that you have, is that you start anew with the process and build it from the ground up, and everybody has the opportunity to reflect their vote or not. As said in the past, y'all did not think it was appropriate to compel a vote from a member, or you could say just the tie nominees would have the vote of the group.
But if we're not requiring 8 votes to select somebody, then somebody can get 1 vote. And
Right.
I mean,
That's right.
what you just said, I mean, you'd have to have extreme nobody vote for anybody.
That's right. But I mean, those are the far ends of those 2 alternatives.
But for them to be nominated to begin with, I mean, before we even do the first round of voting, as long as we had, I mean, if we only had 5 nominees, we wouldn't have to vote. But as long as we have 5 or more nominees at that point, theoretically, we don't have to add any more nominees to get 5 for the committee. Does that make sense?
But it's your choice. I mean,
I
that
see
is
what
what
you're saying.
that is why it says the process. And if you wanted to say the vote, then that needs to be changed. But the last time it was discussed,
Right.
it was discussed in terms of the process. And just because this example would be part of the record that you gave, nominations does not equal balloting. So I think just because you had 5 nominees, you would still have to vote.
Because my brain just went to, so if we got 5 nominees and somebody said, I move nomination cease, and that was approved, you've got 5 nominees. In theory, well, there's your committee. But you're saying balloting would still need to occur.
Right. And if maybe the 5th one didn't get elected and the people who didn't get to get nominated because I moved about Valley Close. That's the other example of why you would have the process begin.
How would they not get elected unless they had 0 votes?
But our other rules though say that each commissioner gets the opportunity to nominate one person. I believe is what it says. And the reason I say it's because somebody can't just quickly cut it off after 5.
You know, with 15 commissioners, I don't know if you can mathematically, if it's possible to ascertain all the alternatives and all the alliterations that you're going to see in this process. So I think what we just try to do is, is come up with common sense rules the best we can, because I just don't think there's any way to come up with all the possibilities.
Just so long as the wording reflects your intention.
Yes.
That do you want it to be the process or just the balloting? And then if you want an express recitation of not requiring a majority.
Just for clarification, I'm going to read 10A because it's about nominations from the floor.
Yes.
When the chair is to receive nominations from the floor, a member may nominate only one person. The floor will be kept open until every member has an opportunity to make nominations or until a motion has been made and seconded, the nomination ceases and the majority of those present so vote.
Excellent. That's an 11 example. Thank you for.
I guess technically that.
It does say or until.
Or that everyone's supposed to have. Well, yeah. And it says may nominate only one person.
But just because you may nominate only one does not mean that you have the right to nominate one. To Commissioner Malone's point that it is an either or with respect to how the nominations close.
Some of that will turn on how the chairman runs the meeting too.
But I'm just going by the words because I'm not going to be running your meeting.
As Commissioner Carrier says, you're the wordsmith. I tend to favor putting the word voting process in there so that we don't do nominations again. I don't know what it.
Do you want to vote on that as a group and to move it forward? Would that be helpful for you now?
But I think at least 3 of us have said.
Did Commissioner Carrier say that also?
I understood.
Say that again, Robbie.
That he didn't want additional nominees. Or didn't think it would be.
Gary didn't hear me. I tend to favor putting the word voting in front of process in the rule so that we don't necessarily have to do nominations every round of voting.
I concur.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So it's about halfway down in the rule over on the right side.
Yeah, where is it, Robbie? I'm looking at it right now. Where are you talking about putting?
It's about halfway down on the right side, line 8. It says, and the process will begin again. We're going to say, and the voting process will begin again.
Vote.
Well, and I think do we not need to add it below as well, where it references in this example the process? Should it be the voting process will begin?
Well, do we want this example in our rules, or do we just want it in the resolution for commission meeting?
That's your choice. I would put it in the resolution.
Okay, I don't know if Carriger and McAllister heard that, but Allison said she would put it in the resolution, but not in the rules.
I'm fine with that.
I just
I
wonder.
just have a feeling 3 years from now. What's going?
What did you say, Commissioner McAllister?
Oh no, I think I would just say 2 years from now, if we remember this, I like having an example in there. It just kind of gives you, hey, here's what we're talking about. Because this was very helpful to me.
Commissioner Malone?
Well, especially to the issue of having a majority, 8 votes or more, I think we either need to expressly say that it's not required or illustrated in the example. And to Commissioner McAllister's point, I do worry 2 years, 3 years, and even this year, we can tell the commission what our intent was. It can be reflected in the resolution, but that don't mean that they won't argue the point, during the meeting.
But going back to the language here, Commissioner Malone is correct that it should also be revised in the illustrated example that it is the voting process would begin again, and in a period striking with nominees taken from the floor. Does that suit your understanding?
Yes. Voting process will begin again, period, and then striking with nominees taken from the floor.
And I would say that rather than and, you would say something like the or this additional round. The additional, rather than an additional round of voting.
Yeah, and you asked a question at the end of your example. What if there's a tie in round 2? Do you guys feel like we need to have the example reflect 3 rounds? I got a head shake from Commissioner Malone.
I think
what Phil made a good point earlier. We could go round it. We could go continuously on this. Like, 2 examples are great. We could go 3 examples, 4 examples, 5. I think we do the best we can. Intention on it. 2 would be, I think, the way it is right now. Those are my thoughts.
I think I'm fine with leaving it like it is with 2, but I do think it would make sense to change nominee in the first round of voting, change the nominee D's vote total to 7 and E and F's to 6.
Right.
That way we reflect that somebody is elected with less than 8 votes.
That's fine with me.
Me too.
And then you'll just, in round 2, you will remove G.
Correct.
And in round 2, we'll remove G. Is there other language in your example here about G that we need to? In this example, 3 nominees were named. So I guess you just say, you could just say, in this example, nominee F would be elected. At the very bottom of the page. You agree, Allison?
I'm looking at it. That doesn't change anything.
Well, you say.
I was going to say you strike the 3 nominees. Yes, that's what you're saying. In this example, nominee F would be elected. So you strike the 3 nominees were named.
Yes.
Yes. And you saw about the publication of the vote. That hasn't come up as a topic. I just want to be sure.
Talking about in the example there?
It's referenced in the example, and it's implicit in the rule.
Yeah, and that's something we talked about that we wanted.
That's right. So
specifically in there was that the vote totals are published in the meeting.
Very good. So I have just changing line 8 and the voting will begin again. I've changed in the example as you just identified the numbers of votes. I won't drag you through those changes. But do you want to have an express recitation perhaps in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, line 6 midway after receiving the most votes shall be elected? Do you want to have a recital of the election of 5 members does not require, or the election to membership does not require a majority of the membership? Do you want that recital? You can put that on the floor.
Anybody have any thoughts on that? Do you want it specifically in the rule?
I think personally, it'd be a good idea to put it in there.
I agree because, like we said, I can't remember from March. I can't remember from yesterday. I'll forget this. It's good to have it in there.
Okay, so say that wording again, Allison.
I would say, this is a proposal. I would say the 5 nominees receiving the most votes shall be elected without requiring majority of the membership. It just that makes it one short sentence. If you want a separate sentence, you could say the elect. You could start anew and say at the end of shall be elected. Period. You could say for the election of these members, majority of the membership is not required. Majority vote of the membership.
Kind of leaning towards the new sentence myself.
Okay.
Majority of the full membership is not required for election or something like that.
Yes, and just to be consistent with the rest of the rules, it would say, does not require adoption or vote by a majority of the entire membership.
All right, so election does not require.
Oh, excuse me, you're asking me. Election does not require a majority vote by the entire membership. Or of, excuse me. Of the entire membership.
All right, so we're going to add a sentence in there. The 5 nominees receiving the most votes shall be elected, period. And then we're going to say election does not require a majority vote of the entire membership.
Sounds good.
Our wordsmith down there is helping us this morning. Our other wordsmith's not here, so we're suffering without Commissioner.
We don't have as hot a cold.
We don't have Commissioner Wheeler to help us now. All right. Anything else on this that anybody's unclear or questions? Are we deciding? It sounds like the leaning is to put the example in the rule. Is that where we're going?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Sure. Commissioner Mullen asked if we could go over the numbers. Do you want to just tweak what we have to here and keep it simple?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So what I'm thinking is 10 for A, 10 for B, 9 for C, 7 for D, and then 6 and 6 for E and F.
That's what I have. And then you struck G entirely, so round 2 only has E at 7 and F at 10.
Yeah.
And then just for good order, in case you want to annotate yours and you can check the resolution, line 2 in the example, after again, there's a period added, striking with nominees taken from the floor, striking and replacing with the. And in line 2, instead of saying the process would begin again, there's an insertion of voting, so it's the voting process. And then on the next page, in this example, nominee F would be elected to the 5th position upon publication of the vote. So striking 3 nominees were named and striking, consider what would happen if there was a tie in round 2.
Yes. I think that's it.
Big deal.
All right. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Commissioner Carriger, motion to send this on the full commission in June. Do I have a second?
Second.
All Commissioner McAllister. Any further discussion before we vote? All right, let's roll call. Commissioner McAllister.
Yes.
Commissioner Carragher.
Yes.
Commissioner Malone.
Yes.
Commissioner Tester is yes. 4 yes, 0 no, 1 absent. All right. I feel like we should have a pizza party or something. Wow. All right. We still got some time to talk about 12F, which Allison also helped us out with. And I will just kind of catch us up to where we were. I'll go through what's been changed since the last meeting, or maybe I should let her explain that. Do you want to?
I think this one I also included, did I not? I hope I
Yeah, you did.
Like you, it's after it's not white hot. You asked for a division between the audit committee and the ethics committee, and these changes more accurately, I think, reflect the way that the county actually operates. The only change that I made to the rule as to ethics which is number 11, is I changed the policy to expressly reflect the Code of Ethics, Washington County, Tennessee, which was put in place, I believe, in 2011 by the commission. So I did rearrange some of the rules because after the split was made of ethics and audit, which I understand was just put together in the past few years, it used to be separate committees. I moved because you had an interest in the standing committees. That was your action, was a revision that I reflected that budget was not a standing committee in the same sense of the other committees, and that it was a statutory committee, that it was not elected by the membership of the county commission, and that it had a different role and a different function. So as I appreciated your charge, it was to put budget as to under a new header. Now, I moved it so that then subcommittees came back up under the standing committees, because then subcommittees would be as to the standing committees, not to the rest of them, because that's what I understood you were doing. But those were not changes that you talked about. That was just my reading it in its entirety, and then I got down to it and thought, well, it seems odd that subcommittees would be off on its own after standing and special, and that special committees would be separate and apart from the standing, and then budget and audit and ethics and intergovernmental affairs would be some kind of hybrid, unidentified type of committee. So big picture, when you look at, and I think I may have put this in the memo, when you look at the federal structure, when you look at the state structure, one typically is dealing with either standing or special committees. One does not have a third group that is unidentified. And so I think what you're looking at under the law as a committee and how you want to function as a commission is what is the role of this group of people, this subset of people with respect to county business. Is it a standing committee with the rights and privileges that are set out as a standing committee in your rules, or are they special committees that have this singular focus and specific area? And then you also looked at how they came to be a member. You were talking about the fact that each of you is required to serve on a number of committees, and that you viewed these committees as being not different, but well, you did say, I think, different. That it was the way they met, the way they served, the way they were appointed was not the same as the standing committees. So it was the selection, the service, the function that you were focused on. So I put in the changes that you had, and I wrote up a county-owned property committee that I think reflects the law and respects the mayor's responsibility to the county for county-owned property. I think it respects the mayor's privilege of controlling county property. And so you had not asked for this, but I did include him, or the mayor. I included the mayor as either an ex officio member of the committee, or you could have the the mayor could be a member. You had not suggested that, but I thought that that was something that you should consider given the statutory authority of the county mayor over county-owned property, so that there's no mistake of the intention of this committee in developing this rule.
On the overall structure of the way you reordered, I thought it made pretty good sense myself. And I appreciate you going to the extra thought there, making that be logical. On the county-owned property, I had a couple questions as to what you just said. The way we've listed it here in this draft, it is understanding committees. So I kind of feel like if it's a standing committee, that may mean by definition that the membership of it would be the commission. So I'm not sure how that plays into whether the mayor's on it or not.
Well, for example, the employee, that's a great point. And that is why I thought of it like employee compensation and benefits, for example. County officials are ex officio members of that committee.
Yeah.
And, well, I don't want to go down a hole, but before you leave today, having studied on this and having had recent experience with the county officials being included in the employee compensation meetings and this sort of thing, I've come to an understanding that many of them don't know that they're ex officio members. And I was going to send them a note letting them know that, but I thought you as the rules committee might like to ask me to do that, to make sure to extend that invitation on behalf of the commission. So I waited to do that, to bring it to your attention that they are ex officio members. So same logic then applied to this committee,
right,
that you would have your member, and then you would have membership, and then you would have an ex officio member of the county mayor, because you would, I think, as a commission committee, want to be working in conjunction. You want your statutory powers as a legislative body to link to the statutory powers of the county mayor without conflict.
That leads to my second question, and that is, if they're ex officio, they have voting power.
Typically not.
Okay.
I see a head shake in affirmation.
Well, I tried myself before tonight to look that up in Robert's rules, and of course everything you look up on the internet is correct, right? And I read something that said that unless it's expressly,
that's right,
that an ex officio member has the same rights as other members, unless it's expressly mentioned that they don't. Now, again, like I said, that's from the internet, so that's why I'm asking you this question.
Typically, an ex officio, and just by the nature of being ex officio, you're outside the membership, and so it means that you are there in a not advisory capacity. There's probably a better word for it than that, but it is not a voting role. Just like, I mean, I'm going to take it back to the example of employee compensation. You want input from the county officials because you as commissioners don't have the authority over employees. And so you express authority over their employees. So of course you as commissioners on that committee want to be engaged with the county officials so that you can develop policy that reflects the actual needs of the county officials and their respective employees. I'm happy to get some better authority than, Google and what I recall from past experience, but I'll get you that. But I would say that the answer is no. An ex officio member does not have voting rights.
I didn't mean to confuse the world by asking that question and take us down a rabbit hole, but I just wanted us all to be clear on that, since that's part of what we're doing here. Anybody else have any questions or comments on what Allison worked up for us?
Yeah, maybe a clarifying question for the county attorney. If we make the county-owned property a standing committee, are we creating a potential tug of war in the sense that, because if I understood you correctly, technically by statute, the mayor has responsibility for county-owned property, right?
Control.
He has control.
Except where the statutes give express authority. And again, off the top of my head, the place that you see it most clearly is that the Tennessee Code gives authority to the sheriff over the, quote, courthouse. Of course, we call the courthouse where we administer justice the Justice Center, and our historic courthouse is our administrative executive offices for the county. But that's an example of the sheriff controlling the property because it's an express recitation in the statutes. But, and I think I brought this up last time because there was some concern, and I remember Commissioner Wheeler saying, okay, good, because there's obviously in county government, county functions as a component of the state. So the county has the authority that the state has given the county. You as commissioners have authority as provided by statute. So this rule tracks the statutory authority of the legislative body, which specifically is addressing issues and recommending measures pursuant to, this is the code section 57106, which provides that county buildings are to be erected and kept in order and repair at the expense of the county under the direction of the legislative body for the purposes stated therein and for all other purposes and requirements under state law. So that's different, but I did think that the mayor does have statutory authority over county property, and I thought it was important to put that in there so that the legislative body and the executive branch are working in tandem, consistent with Tennessee law.
So to clarify, if I may, for example, based on what you just said, the sheriff has control of the Justice Center. In our example, the sheriff has control of the Justice Center. The mayor has control of the building we're sitting in now, the historic courthouse. Would you suggest that the county-owned property committee should be a standing committee, or in light of the control function of the mayor, should it not be a standing?
So I would direct
Which place would it fall, or should it fall?
I would direct you to, and I had not thought about this in advance, despite my request for queries from you, gentlemen. I would say that I would direct you to the definition of a standing committee, which is to have authority to recommend to the board the following general areas of county government. So that is in F on page 2 of the memo attachments, whereas a special committee is from time to time as needs may dictate. The board may desire to establish special or temporary committees, task forces, joint committees, and or other work groups, shall recommend creation. So, I mean, although budget is under as time to time, audit is time to time, it should reflect your intention. And so I don't have a recommendation under the law so long as your description of the committee and does not create legal authority that the state has not provided to the commission, and nor does it overreach into statutory authority that the state has provided to another constitutional office holder, specifically the mayor.
So as a standing committee, I think to Commissioner Tester's point, is there a reason, because when I first reviewed this, I wrote prefer by the latter sentence on 7, that the mayor be an active, full member of that committee rather than ex officio. Is there a reason, as a standing committee, is there a reason he couldn't be a full member of that committee? I'm putting you on the spot. I'm just
thinking
in terms of the control function. He ought to be a member of the committee. I'm not sure. I would probably argue it needs to be a standing committee, but I would probably also argue that he ought to be a full member of that committee.
And that's your choice, and that would mean then that there would be 4 commissioners. But then this committee would be voting to do what the legislative body has authority to do. And so that would be the decision of this committee, and you would be then telling your colleagues that you are recommending that the county mayor have a vote on the legislative body's action, which you may wish to do. That may be exactly what you want to do, that you have the input from the authority with control of the property onto the, so I mean, it's your choice. I mean, but that is the way I think roll out.
Yeah, if I might, we've got coming up in the CIA committee a real live example of this. We've got a complaint from our neighbor on the county farm, and I'm not sure what we in CIA can do, but he's got. I think if you've looked at his communications, he's got some legitimate concerns and complaints, and I'm not sure how we could do all this. I'm like Commissioner Malone, without it being a standing committee and without the mayor being a part of it.
Yeah, it's a good example, Commissioner Carragher. I thought about that when I looked at our agenda for CIA today. Great topic for county-owned property committee.
Yep.
Well, and I have the examples. I don't have the communications. I guess I wasn't on the circulation of whatever you got, so I can't comment on that. But that's exactly how it is. Is that you're going to have this overlap.
Well,
so, but as a rule, the issue is procedurally, do you want an ex officio member, which means that they're a member by virtue of their role as the county mayor. So this is in perpetuity, this county mayor, all county mayors until the rule is changed, that county mayor would have a vote on that committee.
I was going to say, Allison, before CIA meets, which is just a few minutes away, you might check with Susan or Sherry to get a copy of Mr. Jackson's concerns.
Thank you. Ask some good legal questions about it. I like to see that on the fly.
I'll shoot it to you. I've got it over here on my phone.
Since we have just a few minutes till CIA, and Commissioner Wheeler seemed to have pretty strong feelings also about this county-owned property. I'm wondering if it makes good sense to carry this over till next month.
And I have to admit a little ignorance, I guess, in the sense that I don't know that, having read this several times, I don't know that I ever thought about the fact that budget is not a standing committee. But it's the same time, it's not a committee that gets appointed from time to time. I mean, it's a permanent, ongoing committee.
Well, that was something else I thought about. Actually, wrote a little note over here to the side. I kind of feel like the way we rearranged this, where we have the paragraph about special committees, I think it would probably make sense to tweak that wording just a little bit so that it includes. I mean, if we're going to put audit and budget and ethics, I mean, those are all permanent committees. They're not temporary. They're not. I mean, I think it would make sense to maybe add a phrase in there that would include those, and maybe even a phrase also where it talks about the people who are included.
Where are you?
Under special committees. He made the point that he hadn't thought of budget as not a standing committee.
Yeah.
And like budget, ethics, and audit are all like permanent committees, and think the intent is for intergovernmental affairs to be permanent also.
Yes.
So I think it might make sense to tweak this special committees paragraph to include a phrase that helps encompass those so that it makes more sense. And also where we talk about the folks who are included, like it says, may desire to establish special temporary committees, task forces, joint committees, and or other workers utilizing members of the board as well as other boards, commissions, or governmental agencies. We might need to add to that list citizens of Washington County, because some of these specifically say in their definitions that citizens can be.
Mr. Chairman, it's 9:00 and we've got some taxpayers going to join us on our CIA committee. So I would respectfully request we adjourn and move on to CIA out of respect for the taxpayers.
I agree with you, sir. Do I have we can let Allison work on this a little bit based off this conversation, and we'll come back next month. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Motion by Commissioner Malone, second by Carriger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, we're supposed to roll call. I'm sorry. McAllister?
Yes.
Carriger?
Yes.
Malone?
Yes.
Tester, yes. All right. We adjourn. Thank you all.
All right. See you back in a second.
Bye.